Hello Summoners, and welcome back to another ProGuides video. My name is Nathan Ng, and today we'll be talking about our predictions for the 15 most broken champions on patch 11.19. One of the most important things in a constantly evolving game like League of Legends is to be able to adapt with the meta. And that's why we're here for you. If you want to know what's going to be OP before the patch hits, then you'll be ready to hit the ground running without having to test and see if one buff or nerf really made that much of a difference. And if you don't know how to play any of these OP picks, or you're just a little bit rusty, this will give you a few days to brush up on them in some normals or on a smurf. Before we get started, I just want to say that this list is not in any particular order. It's just a list of champions that we think are going to be some of the strongest, most influential picks on this patch. As a small preface before these entries, I do want to note that this is the world's patch, and Riot has been really clear that the changes are aimed at pro play. So despite the change list having a lot of champions in it, it's not really changing for what's OP in solo queue. We'll be starting things off with Riven. Riven is just one of the many overbearing top laners that have made Season 11 hell for everybody in other roles, and this patch will be no exception. The last two patches have been aimed at pro play for Worlds, so I really expected to see some major hits at the top lane now that the World patch has been finalized. But expecting stuff like that is kind of putting your hopes too high, I guess. Instead, they're nerfing Jarvan, who hasn't been in the meta since last season because he had a couple of good patches, and Singed, who I personally haven't really seen since the buff that gave him Grievous on his ultimate. Don't get me wrong, these champions are good, but they aren't nearly as OP as the top lane Titans that can 1v9 games. Okay, end of rant, there's always next patch. Whether you're trying to learn to abuse the broken champions on this list, or how to deal with them when you end up on the wrong side of the matchup, if you really want to speed up the process, you should check out ProGuides.com. We have courses from all your favorite streamers and pros like Core JJ, Aframu, and X Smithy to really help you understand how to play your role. And if you want a more personalized experience, we have coaches available 24/7, ready to help you become the best. Our coaches are top-tier players that have spent years climbing the solo queue ladder to where they are now, and they're ready to share everything that they've learned with you. So stop spinning your wheels on your own and get on the fast track to higher elo today. Now, let's get back on topic, shall we? Our second pick is Xin Zhao. He got a big -3 to his base AD a few patches ago, and honestly, we thought it'd be at least able to knock him down a tier or two. But surprisingly, that wasn't even close to being right. He still remains as one, if not the best jungler in the game. And he's not just one of those champions that does well in one elo range. His overwhelmingly strong dueling power in early ganks, combined with his very easy to use kit, makes him a terror at all levels of play. I think he'll need some deeper changes, such as his W no longer marking targets, but that might change him a lot, or decreasing his dash's range on marked targets before we see him dethroned. Taking things back to the top lane, we have Fiora. She's a bit more counter-pickable than other OP top laners, but there's truly no way to really shut her down for good. Sure, some lanes are hard for her, but eventually she outscales just about anybody. And if the enemy team doesn't have an answer for her, she can always easily take over the entire map. Most super strong split pushers can at least be held at tower, but with Fiora's insane damage and healing, she can pretty comfortably go in for dives. The only way to beat her is to put her massively behind early and close out the game before she can get back into it. But with how crazy solo queue games can get, I don't like banking on stats that involve winning quickly. Our next pick is Talon. Generally in League, there has been some balance between damage output and durability. Somebody that can burst you down is pretty squishy, while tankier champions tend to be more focused on doing damage over time. But then there's this really fun category of champions that are inherently assassins, but can build like a Bruiser. The result is a champion that can one-shot squishy champions, while pretty much being impossible to blow up if they slip up. Talon is one of these ultra anti-fun champs. He can just dive right into the fight, kill your ADC or support, and thanks to Core Drinker and Sterak's, easily live to tell the tale. Another champion that falls into that group is Kayn. Red Kayn and Blue Kayn are also really good, but the so-called quote-unquote purple Kayn is just completely insane to play against. It still one-shots ADCs thanks to the Shadow Assassin's dumb damage, but between Gore Drinker, Sterak's, and your ultimate, you can't just be blown up. Riot tried to nerf this by hitting how much free damage Kayn gets from a Shadow Form passive on 11.17, but it wasn't nearly enough, and the build is still very much alive. It'd be interesting if we could just get a flat 30% damage cut across the board for the entire game, and a huge nerf to sustain, so builds like this wouldn't be so incredibly overwhelming. Another surprisingly untouched champion is Vayne. She's been the best performing ADC across all ranks for quite a while now. The thing is, Vayne is a hypercarry that is supposed to be the go-to pick when dealing with tanky opponents. But she's not just good against tanks. Vayne's kit makes her one of the only champions in the game that can easily deal with bruisers from the top lane. On top of her having plenty of single target damage, she's able to outplay and dodge them with her stealth and tumble, while her condemn allows her to make some distance between her and the threat. The self-sufficiency and her relatively safe laning makes her a pick that can pretty consistently carry games in the right hands. The one really reliable hard counter to Vayne in the bot lane is Draven, and he just happens to be the next pick on our list. He may be a bit more, well, a lot more feast or famine than Vayne, but that sorta just goes to show how OP he is. I mean, if a Feast or Famine champion is sitting nearly at 53% win rate in Diamond Plus Elo, he may be feasting a little bit too often. The main reason that Draven is such a strong pick is that, like Vayne, he's one of the few champions that can deal with bruisers without having to need help from his team. His super high damage allows him to cut them down, and since he naturally builds lifesteal, he can easily just heal through their damage. Next up on the list is Rebel, and specifically in the mid lane. His kit just works super well against the meta melee mid laners. His Q lets him easily both out-trade and out-shove at the same time, while his shield helps shrug off their damage in the process. And when he overheats, he can easily win an all-in on just about anybody. He's able to use his extreme lane dominance to help his jungler with any scuttle fight early or invades, and later on can go for roams to his side lane with his ultimate. This map presence can quickly snowball a game and, more importantly, tilt the enemy team so badly that they don't even want to play. For our next champion, we have Camille. Don't worry, we did not forget the third part of the top lane OP Bruiser trifecta. Until Riot actually does something like, I don't know, removing her ability to do several hundred true damage every few seconds, she will very likely remain on our OP list for a long time. Like Fiora, the big issue with Camille is that she just can't be contained when she's ahead. Even tanks are easily melted, as a combination of her second Q and her Divine Sunderer melts them like butter. And if you're a squishy carry, you'll need the team to stop her from cutting you down in fights. And while Camille is an amazing pick for chopping up target after target, Fiddle makes a list because he can wipe out the entire enemy team all at once if you give him the chance. That type of playmaking is what has kept him in the S tier since last season, regardless of what the state of the meta is in the jungle. Assassin's OP, so is Fiddle. Speed, Demon, Turbo, Chem Tank meta, Fiddle was good then too. Swap to early game focus, which Fiddle doesn't exactly fall into, it really doesn't matter. His teamfight potential is just so massive that he easily survived those 11.7 jungle changes, and he hasn't really let go of that spot in the S tier since. Part of the problem is that even if he's behind, having the potential for a massive AoE fear is always going to be huge in a teamfight. So no matter how ahead the enemy jungler is of Fiddle, they'll pretty much never outclass him in a 5v5. A lot of champions get labeled as elo inflators, aka champions that put players that main them way higher than they should be. It's a pretty common sentiment that enchanters fall into that, but I see the label slapped onto champions like Fiddle and Kayn a lot too. That leads us to today's question of the day. What do you think is the most elo inflating champion or main? Let us know your answers in the comments down below. I can't wait to see them and the discussions that will likely spark between you guys. Anyway, let's get back into the video, shall we? When Fiddle's 5v5 potential has kept him in a mainstay in the jungle for nearly a year now, Rek'Sai's success comes from the polar opposite end of the spectrum. Her goal is to gank as fast and often as she can, and snowball so hard that the enemy team never really gets a chance to group up and 5v5. Her early game aggression is so extreme that she's actually one of the only picks that does well against Fiddle. He can't turn the game around with huge ultimates if 5v5 fights never happen to begin with. If you really want to master Rek'Sai so you can consistently have your opponents FFing at 15, just remember our coaches over at ProGuides.com are your ticket to success. They'll teach you all of the strats that you need. Now for another counter to otherwise impossible to deal with champions, our next champion is Tahm Kench in the top lane. And he is just the perfect pick into all of our aforementioned top lane power picks. Everything about Tahm Kench just makes him impossible for all those champions to deal with. He outdamages in all ins, wins the sustained battle if they take shorter trades, and while they may have good scaling, his damage is nuts at all points of the game. I'm not saying it's impossible to outscale him, but games don't exactly make it to 6 items regularly these days, and it's likely that he maybe used his lead to roll over the entire enemy team well before this point. Back to the jungle, our next pick is Evelynn. She starts up slower than most of the other OP champions on this list, but she's incredibly powerful. Having perma-stealth is just an incredibly broken thing for an assassin. For one, it applies global pressure the second she hits 6. Unless she gets seen while clearing a camp or while past a control ward, the entire enemy team basically has to assume that they could be ganked at any point. Failing to respect that can easily lead to an Evelynn picking up free kills, and that's a snowball that you do not want to see rolling. Once she picks up steam, Evelynn can easily one-shot any target that she gets her claws on. Even beefier bruisers, juggernauts, and straight-up tanks aren't safe from her massive burst when she's fed enough. And honestly, if I were to die, I would want Evelynn to do it. I mean, you know. Anyway, Bard has been a top performing support as long as I can remember, and while Riot did do a nerf earlier this season, it was one of those pathetic slap on the wrist changes that led to absolutely nothing. And now this patch we're seeing a buff to Imperial Mandate. The most common mythic on Bard is Solari, due to the all-around good stats that it gives him, but the Mandate build is still very good for an aggressive playstyle. Personally, when I play Bard this patch, I'll probably be going for the good old Mandate plus Boots of Swiftness into Deadman's Plate. Finishing off our list, we have Nami. Unlike Bard, Nami should be building Imperial Mandate pretty much 100% of the time, so that item being buffed on this patch is basically a direct buff to her. The buff itself may not be that huge, but Nami is already pretty much neck to neck with all the other top tier picks in the role, and even a tiny buff can be enough to make her the clear-cut best enchanter in the game. She also synergizes super well with Vayne and Draven, who both made this list, so if you're a Nami fan, look for a duo partner that abuses one or both of these picks well. Trust me, it's Freelo. And that about wraps things up for our predictions for the 15 most broken champions on patch 11.20. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did, make sure you sub so you never miss out on content such as this. Remember, let us know what champion you think is the most elo inflating down in the comments below. And one last thing, don't forget to check out our Discord in the description box below, where you can go ahead and discuss League further or just hang out and be a part of the community. Can't wait to see you guys back in the next video, but until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and have a wonderful day. Peace.